So archaeology is a study of material remains, and these material remains can be of the past, they can also be of present. There are certain methods through which we interpret the material remains that we find. Primarily, there are two methods. One is known as survey and the other is excavation. So by survey, I mean that we walk around and things that we find on the surface, those are documented, they are mapped, they are photographed. And excavation is when we want to go deeper into something. That is when we excavate. We have trenches. They can be small in size, they can be bigger in size, depending on what our research questions are. Now, the advantage of archaeology is that if we compare it to history, where your sources are written sources, very often there are certain biases that we find with the written sources because they tell us much more about elite sections of the society. Whereas in archaeology, we have the advantage of recovering pasts of ordinary people, also of people who may not have written down anything. And there's a vast section of a population that never wrote down anything. So that's why I particularly found archaeology to be much more fascinating than history, is because it has the potential to recover ordinary people's lives. And what is also happening is that, especially when we move to archaeology of the contemporary, we have possibilities of making interventions even at the policy level. So for example, there is this fascinating work which has been done on the partition, and particularly where Delhi has been mapped and looked at, where a number of methods have been combined. One is spatial mapping, looking at houses that came up in the aftermath of partition, talking to people who moved from Pakistan, from what was a part of undivided India and now Pakistan, into Delhi, and also combining interviews and oral histories. So contemporary archaeology has the potential for us to actually combine archival data, material remains, and oral histories. I think as far as there are two things that are unique about the courses that we offer at Azim Premji University at Bhopal. One is, of course, the course content, and the other is pedagogy. In that sense, it is very, very unique as compared to any other university. And there is a lot of focus given to pedagogy. So here, we generally don't believe in the lecture mode. We believe in a much more active way of teaching, and we see teaching as a collaborative effort. So our endeavor is that when we are teaching any course, we are constantly having a dialogue with the students. We have discussions. It is possible very often that we may introduce some concepts to the students initially, but then we discuss them. The same goes as far as the readings are concerned, that there are, for each topic that we are covering, there are certain prescribed readings, but we sit in the classroom, we divide the students into different groups, and each one reads up certain portions, and then we discuss them. So it's a very free-flowing discussion that happens, and that's when real learning is possible. Because a lecture mode, which is something that you find in many universities, just doesn't work. So in that sense, here there is a real shift away from the kind of pedagogy that is employed in most universities. And in terms of course content also, the kind of courses that we have thought through have a certain relevance, which they would be able to use in any job that they take up after they graduate from this university. We don't remain confined just to the classroom, especially when it comes to teaching courses in history and particularly archaeology. So what we are planning to do is that we will be taking students for various field trips. And we are very lucky to be located here in Bhopal, around which there are many important and different kinds of historical sites. Say, for example, we have Bhimbetka. So we can take students to Bhimbetka and show them how people lived there, the hunting gathering societies lived there 100,000 years ago. We have beautiful cave paintings there which date to about 15,000 years ago. So they can almost imagine how life would have been. And it's in the natural habitat. We have stone tools strewn all over. Then we will also be taking them to Sanchi, where we have beautiful Buddhist stupa remains and viharas. There is also Udaygiri caves, so they can see one of the earliest sculptures that are being experimented with, various forms of Vishnu, etc., all being depicted on the walls of this hillside that has been carved. And some of the earliest temples, Brahmanical temples, actually start getting constructed in this region. So you can see them in Sanchi, you can see them at Udaygiri. So I think these experiences that our students will get will really bring alive and the joy of, actually they will live out history through these field visits that we have planned for them. They will be, each semester they will be taken to some historical and archaeological site. And there will also be assessments around these field visits. So my interest in history began accidentally, I must confess. I was interested in history as a means of getting a job. But while I was preparing for that job, I learned that there is so much about history that we know that has resonance even today. And that is something that a lot of people get very excited about. Even today when we talk to people, everybody wants to speak about their knowledge of history, their understanding of history. But history for me still remained a little distant because one has to access texts which are sometimes very abstract. What really brought the past, and in a certain way, history closer to me was when I discovered archaeology. And I discovered archaeology when I went to the field. I went to an excavation that was being conducted at Nageshwar, and that was a Harappan site. And that's when I discovered that field work is so exciting. Just the thrill of digging up things that belong to the past, feeling them, touching them, exposing them, and then trying to think of people who would have been associated with those artifacts. And that love for archaeology is what I see today among so many people. The minute I say I am an archaeologist, they want to start talking about archaeology. They want to start talking about places they've been to. They want to find out what really happened. What does one do as an archaeologist? And this interest and love for archaeology is what led me through various projects from Gujarat to Uttar Pradesh to Madhya Pradesh. And I find that if we can bring in more of archaeology in our history programs, we will be able to draw in many more students, because I find that if they can touch things, if they can feel things, if they can visit those places, that's when history comes alive for them. Otherwise, it's just something remote, it is something distant, it's something written in a book.